Look, it's a really interesting topic today, and I've just been reflecting over the last week with several CEOs and business owners that I've been speaking to. So some CEOs of reasonably large organisations and some business owners, in one case, I think with 5 people, in another case with 20 odd people. And when I asked them the question around, number one issue that they've got at the moment, everyone is saying just the new challenges, the more complex challenges of helping their people develop, be more motivated to perform at a higher level to help the businesses be more competitive and ideally to be able to grow. So that's the reason why we've picked the topic today around unlocking your team for greater performance and profit. And we'll start presenting it to you. As I said, please pop questions into the chat. There'll be a recording made available, and there'll also be some other resources that you'll be able to access. We probably all know who that person is there, and so Richard Branson didn't go to Harvard. He started his first business, which was a student newspaper as a university student in the UK. And what he learned through the real university world of real business experience is that, if you've got, a quality, motivated, happy, engaged workforce, you're much more likely to be serving the customers better, to be more productive, and that's likely to lead to larger profits and growing profits. So he didn't need the Harvard research that Liz will be sharing with you shortly that actually underpins what's actually going on, and from a causal perspective rather than from a correlation perspective. So we're going to talk very briefly. Liz is going to take us through the Harvard research so we all have a good solid understanding of what has been learned and proven as it relates to service firms in particular. So service firms are these days very people and technology heavy. And then in terms of the key factors that will help team members learn faster and perform at a higher level. And then in particular, is it that as a leader of a team or as a business owner where you might have a number of teams, what is it that your team members need to experience so that they're able to be more engaged, to be faster learners and better performers? I will then talk about the scores on the board system, a bit about its history, and a bit about the 5 parts of it. I'll do the first 4 parts. Liz will do the 5th part. And then we'll talk a little bit about how, when the system is implemented, the sorts of things that the team members need to consistently, regularly experience actually get delivered. And whether that's at the level of a small business with half a dozen people, whether it's at the level of a CEO of a large organization that might have dozens and dozens of teams, we'll talk a bit about that. I'll talk briefly about the process of getting this thing set up. You don't go forward and get it all set up straight after this webinar. This thing gets implemented typically over about a 6-week period. You do one part of the system at a time, and then you get to the stage where the 5 parts are in place, and then you start to do it on a regular basis, and amazing things start to happen for the business.
Thanks so much, Bill. Thank you so much for having me. A little bit of context, I've actually implemented scores on the board with a couple of teams in the past, and I have a new team now, and I'm in the process of implementing it again. And it really does take you from manager to leader. Okay, so I want to kind of point that out first. It really builds an entirely different relationship with your staff compared to what you think you might have now. And one of the things also that I really love about it is that it gives you measurements on engagement. So we often think that measurements are around revenue. How much revenue is the employee bringing in, or how many things are they ticking off every day and that sort of thing. But that actually doesn't tell you anything about engagement. It doesn't tell you anything about how they interact with customers. And what you can find is that the revenue is coming in, but your profitability is going down the toilet because you've got more absenteeism, you've got more sick leave, you've got more resignations, and you're having to hire people because your staff aren't engaged. And that's what I love about scores on the board, is that it actually really does engage the team. And we all know that engaged staff lead to satisfied customers, which creates improved business performance. And so it's not just staff doing the work, it's engaged staff, because with engaged staff, you then have them, they're on board more often, they're happier, they're doing more and some of the questions I know Bill might take you through that you ask your staff, in the beginning, really do lead to you really understanding how engaged your staff are. And the service profit chain really builds that idea of how engaged staff leads to satisfied customers, which leads to improved business performance. And it's not just, as I said, it's not just about the revenue, it's about everything. It's about the efficiency, the effectiveness, the profits, the growth, the ideas in the business, the innovation. Everything starts to happen, and it starts with engaged staff, which is what Scores on the Board delivers. So what are the behaviors of highly engaged employees? And a lot of this is intuitive, but I do want to run through it so you can start thinking about maybe people in your team and thinking about, well, are they really like this? Are they just coming in and doing the do? Or do they actually look for opportunities to improve organizational performance? Or have they given up? And do they come in with a few ideas and now they're not saying anything? Have a think about that. Are they positive about the job and the organization? Are they bringing more potential employees into the organization because of what they say about it outside? Do they keep up to date with developments in their field? Are they, or when new developments come out or training happens, do they roll their eyes? How engaged are they to actually keep up to date? Do they believe in the organization? And this goes back to about them being positive about the organization. Are they aligned with the vision of the organization? Is their personal vision, if you like, aligned with the vision of the organization? And have a think about that with your own employees. Do they see the bigger picture, even sometimes at personal cost? Will they go that little bit of extra mile to give to the organization when it's needed, or are they clocking off, mentally and physically at the same time every day? And do they actually work actively to make things better? Are they actually trying to make things better again, or are they coming in and doing the do and leaving? Is that all they're doing? And this is one of the ways. The next one is really one of the ways that you start to really understand engagement. Can they be relied upon, and do they go beyond just the job requirements? So can you ask them to do that one extra thing? Are they looking for that, for growth in their role? Are they looking for any sort of growth? And the last one, which is critically important, again, and you might think someone who's clocking in and clocking off does this, but do they treat everyone with respect? And do they offer themselves to actually help others to perform effectively? So I want you just to reflect on that as we go through the rest of the presentation, to think about staff in your organization and how they're actually engaging. So that's what that looks like. But how do they get there? How staff, to get them to that point of feeling engaged, they actually feel valued and involved. So they actually feel that what they do has value and that they are valued for doing it. But also they feel involved in the decision making that happens within the team and within the organization. And so some critical ways that the Harvard research showed that you can get this sense of value and engagement is to involve employees in decision making. And you might be thinking, oh, but some decisions are really big. You can actually do it, and this is the beauty of Scores on the Board. So it works beautifully. Managers listen to employees, and within that listening, there's actually action gets taken as well. Okay, so it's not just, yeah, I heard you, it's active listening, and then action happens as well. And then employees have opportunity to actually develop their ideas. Okay, and I think that's really critical. They have the opportunity to develop their ideas, and within that, their jobs. And through doing that, that's when they really feel valued and involved. So going back to the listening, good suggestions are actually acted upon, and the employer demonstrates concern about the employee's health and well-being. And this actually came home to me recently where, something had happened, and just that act of going and saying, hey, I heard this happened. Are you okay? Really does make the employer go, I'm not just a number. Okay, I'm not just a number. I'm actually valued in this team and they care about my health and well-being. And through, we've talked about employees being able to voice their opinions. Now, in that, it's not just about managers listen. This is also about feeling that they are in a safe environment where if they voice their opinions, there's not going to be any negative repercussions. Okay. And again, the scores on the board process enables this in a really great way for you as a manager, but an even better way for you as a team. And as I said before, the senior execs and the managers do actually show value really through all of these other ways of showing value for the employees. And through all of that, it actually builds trust. So your team ends up, it quite transforms the whole vibe of the team, if you like, that it uplifts everything. And I think that's really pertinent to the next slide because, we all know that if there's someone in the team that's not happy, then it starts to bring the whole team down and it kind of becomes very contagious. There's a whole, it's that sense of contagious emotions where, one person starts saying something negative, maybe even creates a story and then it kind of catches on and then other people kind of get that vibe and then it kind of works its way through the team. Whereas what scores on the board does is it catches that really quickly. If there is any sort of negativity, it gets caught really quickly and it gets turned around. So instead of the emotions that are being contagious bringing the team down, it takes the whole team up. And I think that's actually the main thing that I really loved about the process bill is that it gets everyone feeling valued and involved at the same time and really takes the team up a whole other level.
Look, thanks very much, Liz. And if I can just share a couple of things from our experience with this over many years, and having had the benefit of being educated at Harvard and first seeing this research when it was made available. But it basically, we often think, okay, if we pay people more money, give them more flexibility with their time, et cetera, they're going to be more engaged. Now, in many businesses, particularly large businesses, maybe the senior executives over the course of months, if not years, can make some changes at that level. But as a team leader, whether you're running a team in a contact center, an admin area, a sales team, a bank branch, or as a small business owner, where depending upon the profitability and growth of your business, you've got very limited ability to necessarily change those things in any significant way. And that's why when you look at what's within your control as a team leader or as a business owner, the experience of the employees, ensuring that they are feeling emotionally valued and involved, and then looking at what Liz has taken us through, or what do they need to experience to feel that, those number of different factors, if they're experiencing them on a practical, regular basis, they will emotionally be more, they will feel more valued and feel more involved, and they'll be more committed. Now, the other thing when I think about this neuroscience, which I've been following for a long time, and then sort of writing and sharing with people that I've coached over the years, and in my little book Scores on the Board, I remember spending time with one of my grandfathers many, many years ago. And he had this saying, he used to say, look, enthusiasm, it can't be taught. It can only be caught. And that's for those of you that are listening in today that are leading a team, that are running a business and leading the business. Ultimately, the emotional vibe, the mood in the organization, you are fundamentally responsible for it. And if we end up with some people having a particularly bad time, have a particularly dark view of the world, sometimes I used to call them sort of dream stealers. Unless we can have the team help those people turn things around, or unless you intervene with respect to the removal of that dream stealer from the business and from the team, it becomes very difficult for the team members to start to feel involved and valued in the way that we want them to do it. So let me start sharing with you now the 5 parts of a system. And now I call it very deliberately a system. There are 5 parts to it. And as we say, look, if you work the system works. If you learn about this and go, oh, it's interesting, and you don't implement it, it's not going to work for you. but it is a process, as Liz said, or it's a system. It's made up a set of component parts that all go together in a particular order and get implemented in a particular practical way, and without the need for any fancy technology. We have seen this thing implemented by teams of all types and all sizes in nearly all industries and pretty much around the world. So we've worked with more than 3,000 business teams, from small businesses. I remember working with Village Roadshow a few years ago, where even the kids in the candy store selling the popcorn, through to the people in the projection room, we were able to get them to turn up more often, more turned on and more tuned in, and get greater customer satisfaction as a result of them actually implementing this system. All the way through to very senior executives who would use the system with their top team and learn how to use it, and then they would bring it down to the teams below them. And then those teams would then bring it down to the teams below them. So we often hear about the need for leadership in large organizations to be role modeled. The system of scores on the board enables that to take place in a really easy way. The third bullet point you see there is used to improve major performance, in all areas. But it does all start with the team members, the employees feeling valued and involved. It all starts there. It's a causal link in a chain where leadership provides great service to the people, serving the employees, building the local level culture and environment, which means they're much more interested in serving the customers. As we say, the customers become more loyal. They stay, and pay. So you retain them. They stay working with your business. When the topic of your products and services come up, they say great things about it to other people. So for those of you running service firms, let's say in the property area where the customer may not go through the particular transaction type very often, that word of mouth referral is critical from someone who's recently bought a house and, say, worked with a conveyancer or a law firm, where when they get asked the question, we want them saying really positive things about your business or about you as the professional. And the final thing is they pay. So stay, say, pay. And pay is, they're not just looking for the lowest price. That they understand that the benefits you get minus the price you pay is the value. And so you'll find that loyal customers will typically pay a premium over what people are paying at the bottom of the market, where the only thing they can see different between service providers is the price. So those engaged employees then drive those loyal customers to be more loyal. If they're more loyal from a revenue point of view, you're attracting more customers more easily and at a lower cost. Therefore, revenue is going up. You've got a set of staff that are staying with you longer and are more productive, less reworking. So they're much more productive, which means in time you can even pay them more because the business is more profitable. And because you're growing the profit, and if you invest that back in growing the business, that starts to provide other opportunities for the team members in terms of their own personal growth, career development, etc. So the 5 parts of the system, when fully implemented, start with having a vision, and a vision for either the team, if you're leading a team, or for the business. And I'm going to talk through vision in a little bit more detail in a minute. Then in terms of goals, and goals in 3 particular areas, whether it's for a team in a large organization or whether it's for the business itself. Simple mechanisms to get feedback on what the level of performance is in those goal areas. Then having a sense of, well, what is impacting the performance, and what are the things impacting the performance that are in the control of the team members. And then having identified those, having the team then work up an action plan for the next period, which might be a fortnight, might be a month, rarely ever longer than a month. Because this is a cycle that once implemented, you'll implement it, let's say, on a monthly basis. There'll be a scores on the board meeting with the whole team where these things will be discussed. Look, let me go through, and the last bullet point here on this slide just reinforces that when Liz talked about the 7 things that an employee needs to experience consistently to feel valued and involved, when this system is implemented on a regular basis, they experience those 7 experiences, and therefore they feel more involved and more valued. They're more engaged. Customers get a better experience and are more loyal. Revenues and profits grow, given that productivity is being improved with expenses, which can feed back then into more investments in growing the business. So let me take just a few minutes to talk a little bit about this vision. And, particularly if you're running a small business, what we would encourage you to do is to think about the customers of that business and how you would describe the ideal experience for the customers and the ideal experience for the members of the team. So, if a team member who was highly engaged was overheard at the pub talking about what a wonderful business you've got to work for and what a wonderful leader you are as the business owner, what sorts of words and adjectives would they be using to describe it? If a customer was raving about the experience they'd had in dealing with your business, again, what sort of adjectives would they use? If you're in a larger organization where, you're running a team, perhaps in a functional area like customer service, if I think about when the Australia Post outlet several years ago implemented this, they developed then at that level of the outlet a vision for what that outlet wanted to aspire to be. And there's a process, and a very simple process, and we have the resources available for you to go through developing a team vision. It involves the team members being involved in it. Very straightforward. Typically takes a couple of half-hour meetings and team members doing a bit of thinking for 30 minutes or so. And that will help you then shape up an aspirational, emotionally compelling vision. And typically it will have this staff dimension to it, this customer dimension to it, and some dimension around operational effectiveness. So in some cases, a team in a larger business does not have a profit end result, but it's got perhaps the number of calls to be served or the average cost of handling a call in a contact center. So again, depending on your environment, it doesn't matter whether it's a team in a big company or a small business team, you create a team, or if it's a small business, a business vision. I want to move now to the second part, which is around goals. Well, before I go to goals, I just want to let you know there are additional resources. So that's the website address there where, after the webinar, you can get to it. There are some free resources available. There's also resources available for any of your team members. On the far right-hand side of the slide, I've got it here in front of me, the book that we wrote. I think it's one of the easiest books ever to read because it's a set of stories about real people in real situations. And in some cases, they need to build a particular skill to perform better at work as an individual. In other cases, they're leading a team. In some other cases, they've got a small business that they're running. So it's a set of stories. It's very easy to read. And at the back of it, there's basically the steps to set the system up and then to operate the system, for those of you that are very good followers of recipes. So in some cases, Liz and I, we're doing the MasterChef TV show here today. And of course, you can go away and get the cookbook and start experimenting. And there are other ways where you can go about learning how to do this. But if you go to scoresontheboard.com, you'll find you can access some initial resources there. If you're looking to get help in actually implementing the system, there's the ability for team leaders to then sign up for that. But let me now get to my second part of the system, which is goals. So you're leading a team, or you're leading a small business. So there are three key areas. We need goals in the area of team experience or team engagement. What's it like being on this team? We need to have a goal in that area. Then in terms of who does the team serve? Now, more often than not, if it's a small business, the team's involved in helping each other and serving the actual customers or clients of the business. If you're in a larger organization and leading a team, it may be that the clients or customers of your team are another part of the organization. So in terms of the output that you deliver from your team in the organization, it's going to other parts of the organization, and they are in fact your customers, and not the external customers, let's say, of the bank or of the utility or of Australia Post, but it's another couple of areas, of those organizations that use what your team actually delivers in terms of its product and services. And then the final area is, broadly speaking, operational effectiveness. Now, for a small business, that may well be revenue and profits. For a team inside a larger business, in terms of whatever it is that you guys have to produce, it'll often be reflected in key performance indicators or things on a scorecard, depending on how your organization goes about setting KPIs, key performance indicators, or targets, or whatever they are. So we need to have, when we implement the system to get a team becoming high performing, or to get a business to become high performing, we need goals in these three areas. Now, having a big vision and getting all excited about that is one thing. If there are no particular goals in relevant areas that are going to underpin the movement towards the vision, they're nothing more than sort of pipe dreams and aspirational. We haven't got away. We need to measure. We need to have areas to measure our performance in, and that's what the goals area is about. But having set up some goals in those areas, the next thing we need to do is actually get some feedback. We've got to work out, well, where are we at now with respect to team experience? How do the members of the team feel we're actually going? How could we go about getting some measurement of that? Some leaders then also say, you know what, as the leader of the team, I provide leadership and coaching services to the team and the team members. So I could also seek a bit of feedback myself in terms of how am I going as the team leader. So we know that great leaders are not born; they're made, and in many respects, we learn from our mistakes and we learn from other leaders that we've worked for and worked with. But again, how are we getting feedback on how we're going, and how are we identifying how we can improve to better serve the team members? So we see in many cases a number of leaders also seeking to have that as a goal area and getting some performance measurement via what we call feedback. Same with customer experience. In recent years, many of us have had, we're sort of like death by feedback survey. Give us a score out of 10. Do this, do that. Would you recommend us to a friend or relative? It's part of something called a net promoter score. There's lots of different ways of doing it, but in Scores on the Board, we've got a really simple way that's easy for everybody and actionable, which I'll give you an example of in a minute. And then operational effectiveness. Now, if it is about revenues and expenses and expenses, subtracted from revenues, getting profits, whether you're using Xero or whether you're using MyOb, you're probably getting financial measurements coming out pretty regularly. Maybe operationally, you're keeping a track of the number of files you're processing. If you're, in the property settlement business, the number of settlements at the start of the week, number that have settled, on the due time, et cetera, et cetera. But to give you a sense of sort of the sorts of questions that we've seen used very effectively when it comes to getting feedback. This is a really simple one. I call it the old sort of, going to a movie and giving it a score out of 10 effectively. So in terms of your team members, you could ask them on a regular basis, and that might be fortnightly, might be monthly. We've had teams do it on a weekly basis, but literally ask them, on a Friday, if a score of 10 means you're really looking forward to coming to work, how would you score your feelings at present? How are you feeling? So everyone can come up with a score out of 10. The next thing is to look, what's the one thing or a couple of things that you think would help you improve this score, and more importantly, probably ideas they've got or suggestions that are within their control or the team's control. Now, in big companies, we see people when they first start answering this stuff, they go pay rise, more long weekends, more holiday leave, all of those sorts of things. A cappuccino machine, espresso machine in the office. Where we want people really focusing is on things that are within their control in terms of their thoughts and actions, both as individuals and as members of the team. Notice how simple it is. Just give us a score from 1 to 10. 10 out of 10 would be perfect. It would be nice. It would be like they're not thinking about, thank God it's Friday and I'm getting out of here and I'm going off to watch, in my case, Collingwood play footy on Saturday. No. It's like, thank God it's Monday. I'm back at work. The weekend was okay, but there's nothing more enthralling and energizing than working with the team and being back at work. So it's thank God it's Monday is what we aspire to. Now, from the perspective of a leader, if you're going to take this as an area that you want to get some feedback on and you want to continuously improve how effective you are at leading the team. Now, in the red box here is an example of a question we've had many hundreds of team leaders use. Really asking, score from 1 to 10 on how helpful they've been, in helping the team member achieve their objectives or achieve their goals. You'd be amazed over the years, and so we've had more than 30,000 team members across 3,000 teams use Scores on the Board. And in the earlier days of implementing, we actually provided software for collecting all this information. You would be amazed at the percentage of people, particularly in large corporations, that actually would not have any goals or objectives. And in fact, that was the area they were looking for a bit of help on initially, because they were reasonably aimlessly having the work expand to fill the time available. Yeah, work expand to fill the time available, rather than necessarily, yeah, I've got to get X files completed this week. I've set a couple of other personal development activities down and I've got them completed. So again, from a team leader point of view, or the leader experience that they're having, get a score out of 10 on how helpful you're being. And then ask them, well, what's a suggestion on how you could be more helpful over the next period? Again, which might be fortnightly, might be monthly. So in terms of, the cycle of feedback, we would typically recommend from the team perspective or the employee experience doing it fortnightly or monthly. If you're in a really intense operational environment, particularly retail environment, seeing lots of customers, so bank branches, Australia Post outlets, personal service firms, nail salons, where there's a lot of interaction, particularly with customers taking place. Weekly is probably the most effective. Customer experience. So again, in terms of how you might go about getting a score out of 10 from them, there's plenty of free apps available these days that you can easily put on an iPad if you're physically seeing the customer. Very simple mechanisms for free via things like SurveyMonkey to send them a quick survey. And of course, many people are now getting reviews, so at least you can see how many star reviews you might be getting, as long as it's your actual customers that are completing the reviews rather than fake customers or bots. And then from an operational effectiveness, weekly, really is ideal, particularly around keeping, for you business owners, eyes on revenues, expenses, cash in, cash out, arguably beyond the engagement of your people and a business model that will be profitable. There's nothing more important than actually knowing exactly the cash that's come in and the cash that's gone out on a weekly basis. I'll talk a little bit about gap analysis now. It's a bit difficult to have a gap when you first set the system up, because although you've got a goal area, you haven't actually set a number yet for what the goal target is. Let's say for team experience, in your own mind, you might say, yeah, we want to be an 8 or a 9 out of 10. But until you actually get an initial set of feedback, you don't really know where you're at out of 10. And it's pretty simple the way it works. Let's say you've got 6 or 7 people, and let's say they are physically in the office. You can give them pieces of paper to fill out to give a score out of 10 before they go home, and to write down 1 or 2 suggestions. And the mathematics is really complicated. You add up all those scores and divide it by the number of people, and that then gives you the feedback score. Similar approach when it comes to getting customer feedback. So you've got a simple score out of 10 in terms of getting the feedback as to where you're at. Now, when you look at suggestions that are being made to improve the score, that starts for you with areas that the team could potentially work on to start taking some action, sort of part 5 of the system, to actually improve the performance. And ideally, when we then next get feedback, see that the score has gone up a little bit. So with respect to the gap analysis, it really starts to happen after you've implemented the first action plan. And then you get to see, well, given the gap analysis that we've done and given the action plan, where have we got to from a score this time? That's why we call it scores on the board. And it's a very simple scoreboard we won't go through today, but it's very simple, where you put up the team vision, you have the initial feedback scores, you have the gap analysis and the action plan written up. And then you ask the team, when you go through the action plan with them and agree with them, because they're going to be part of developing it. And it's simple stuff. So it's not complicated in terms of what they will originally come up with. But then we get them to imagine, we say, look, guys, we've agreed this is the priority. We've worked out an action plan. We've got Jack's going to get this done by Wednesday. Mary's going to get that done then on the Thursday. So everyone's got something to do on the action plan. Now, before we leave the meeting, I want you all to imagine that, in 2 weeks' time, when this action plan's completed and we've got this implemented, how do you think you'll score your team experience out of 10 then? So for the first time, I would say in 90% of cases of the team members we've dealt with over the years, for the first time, the employee is going to be part of actually setting a score goal or a target to aspire on based on the feedback score, where we're at the moment as a team, what we've agreed the priority is from the gap analysis, and the action plan and who's going to sort of do what and when in terms of implementing the action plan. And then we're going to say, well, where do we think we'll be? And they look at the feedback score and go, yeah, well, we're sort of 6.5 out of 10. But we're going to work on getting this done. We're going to do a little bit of coaching. We're going to have a lunchtime session on this. Someone's going to check the work that Mary's doing. It's all agreed. Okay, imagine if we get that done over the next 2 weeks and they look at them, currently we're 6.5, you'll see most people will come up with a goal score now. That's more than 6.5. You add all of that up, divide it by the number of people, and now on the scoreboard in a different color, you mark for the next period what the goal level is for that particular goal area. And one of the things I've noticed over the years, having initially conceived and workshopped and then altered this system, and then implementing it with the very first organisation to use it was Westpac in all of its contact centres and in all of its branches. And in 18 months, they went from number 3 in customer service to number 1. Yeah, they made some systems changes, but largely they implemented the scores on the board system and process. And what I can tell you 100% is that while everyone will often talk about the customers and doing better for the customers, the team members, the reality is nothing really improves until the team experience improves. And as they implement this under your leadership, where it's not for you to go and implement the action plan, it's for the team to implement the action plan, their mindset starts to change. They start to feel more empowered. Their good ideas are getting acted on. And you just see some absolute magic start taking place. So as Liz said, sort of like the 3 A's that all managers and business owners dread when it comes to the team members. Apathy, right? Absenteeism. Oh, yeah, I'm not feeling too well. It's amazing how that seems to happen often on the old days before working from home. It would often be on the Friday or on the Monday from the younger workers and others, because after all, they've got so many days of sick leave entitlement. Right? We'd start off with apathy, absenteeism, and then finally attrition, or them leaving the business and going somewhere else. When you've got people feeling involved and valued and part of a team working towards being winners and working towards the vision that they've all been a part of creating, they don't want to let each other down. They become true teammates. They go the extra mile. So look, I think, Liz, that's all I wanted to share with respect to the gap analysis part of the system. But I might ask you to pick up then the concept of the team action plan and the action planning, and then share with everyone, when you think about when this is implemented, what does that mean for those key behaviours that I need to experience to feel involved and valued?
Thanks so much, Bill. So, I mean, when you do the action, so as Bill was saying, you get the feedback and then you look at the gaps, and that's when, as a team, you start to think about, well, how do we close the gap? And remember, it's done as a team. It's not you in your office doing this. This is actually done as a team. And you draw up an action plan. And as we know, in every action plan, there's kind of like the task that needs to get done, when, by, and who's going to do it. And you actually involve the team as well in who's going to do it. So it's not, again, you going off and doing things. And this is where it becomes really empowering for the team members. So not only has their feedback been heard, because you're now thinking, you've identified those gaps, but you're now actually saying, all right, as a team, let's actually do something about this now. And this is where they really start to go, oh my goodness, I had that suggestion and now we're going to do something about it. And it's important, though, I think, that you don't just then go do that, that this isn't about, just delegating all responsibility and accountability. You're still accountable for how they do this. So you can also start smaller. Well, how about we go investigate that first? So you give them not massive projects, but you give them those, if you like, the beginnings of those things, so that they go, oh my goodness, I was heard and now we're starting something. And what actually happens is the whole team starts to rally. So they see one thing or another thing or another thing. And often these things are really small. Like sometimes these things can be as simple as, in one of the teams I was in, it was getting a suitcase on wheels for all of the event stuff. something really, really small. And it was like, okay, let's go to Officeworks and we'll get a suitcase. And sometimes, though, they can be like a bigger project where you start with an investigation. The other thing I will say, as a little bit of it's not a caution, but it also does hold you accountable to your standards. Okay. So it does actually bring you up a level as well, as I said, as a leader, not just a manager. So sometimes one of the things, that came out in the gap analysis was in terms of access to me and from one of my teams. So I actually said, okay, we workshopped it. I said, well, what would work for you? And in the end, we said, okay, if your door could be open between these hours and these hours, then we know we can just come in and chat at that time. And it was something really simple that you might not think about, but as a team, they said this would really work for us. And it was kind of like, okay, I can do that. Absolutely. That's easy. Let's do that. So it also, uh, it's not just about the team being heard, but it's about the team also seeing you, listening, and you also stepping up into that, if you like, that leadership kind of sense. And if you go to the next slide, Bill, it's that really is about everyone having a voice. Okay. Everyone has that voice and everyone gets involved. So you have a team meeting where you're looking at those gaps. It's not, as I said, it's not you sitting in an office, it's not someone else, it's everyone together, getting together and saying, okay, here are all the gaps. Let's now workshop how this might work. And everyone gets involved and everyone is empowered to make suggestions on how that might work. And if there's kind of a couple of suggestions, you can then actually say, okay, well, how about you investigate that and you investigate that? And again, everyone still feels involved and they feel like they are making a really, positive contribution and everyone's getting involved. And the other thing it does is that you focus improvement on the areas that build engagement. Okay, it's not just on, they're definitely coming up with things that improve the way they work and what happens and how they interact with customers, but it actually ends up what you're working on is all those things that also build engagement. And I think that's particularly what I loved about it. Um, and at the end, everyone feels involved and valued.
Well, thanks very much, Liz. And a couple of people have just texted me questions. So now will be a good time to put in the chat if you've got particular questions for us. As I mentioned before, if you head over to scoresontheboard.com, you can learn more about the system, and anyone can access it if there's a particular skill. Let's say it's, I don't know, delegation is a classic one that many business owners and team leaders have asked for help with in the past. Another one is actually one-on-one feedback, in terms of having that one-on-one sort of session with people. But what I do, Liz, is I might take us off the screen sharing, so we fill up a little bit more of the screen, and I'll start dealing with these first couple of questions that I've got here on SMS. And if other people have got questions for us, they can come to us through the chat. So let me move us away from sharing. Okie dokie. So I've got one here about challenges of the hybrid working environment, given that the team is in a few different places and largely working remotely. How do we go about getting it set up and creating the vision? In my experience, you don't see any substitute for getting everyone together for a short period of time to start to introduce the implementation of the system. Now, the reading of the book is quite a simple way for people to learn more about the system and see which characters in the book they might relate to. And as they read the story, it's not a textbook, it's not a personal development improvement book, it's a set of stories, basically about a kid's soccer team. But that's a good place to start. The other thing is our vision creation kit, which you can contact us about and we can send it through to you. Typically, when we've worked with organizations that actually want a workshop conducted, we would run a 2.5-hour session, ideally face-to-face, or if you've got all the groups together, all the team members together in the room, via Zoom, but a 2.5-hour workshop to actually explain the system, some of the things and the background behind it. We are very great believers here at Small Business Australia of providing background education and knowledge. We believe everyone is capable of understanding, what works and why, the context of it, before then learning how to actually apply it. So we're typically a 2.5 to 3 hour workshop, and there are scores on the board coaches all around the world that are available to come and help you do that. If you are someone that is pretty good at, implementing things yourself, access to the online resources, accessing the team version, everything you need is there, but you also have access to some online support and online coaching in doing it. But look, in the ideal world, organising for people to be in the room together when you start to introduce this, and introducing it that we're not just going to go cold turkey and start doing all the 5 pieces, all the 5 parts of the system. You do one part at a time, typically over a 6 to 8 week period, and get a full cycle implemented. And then the more you do it, the better you get at it, the easier it becomes, etc., etc. You'll also note on the Scores on the Board website, when you access the personal skill development area, there are a bunch of videos that we have put together on the neuroscience of adult learning. And again, it's really valuable stuff for everyone in your team. I'd say everyone in your family to watch, to understand the concept of neuroplasticity and how we actually learn new knowledge, but more importantly, combining knowledge with experience. A plus E equals S. Knowledge plus experience gives us a skill. Skill plus motivation will give us, the action of people using the skills. So that's really helpful educational material, because there's a number of people that believe they can't change. I am the way I am. That's my personality, etc., etc. And rigorous science says if you believe that, it's true for you. But the reality is, unless you have a significant mental illness, right, which some people do have, unless you have one of those, you are absolutely capable of changing your brain and your knowledge and your skills through what is known as neuroplasticity. And if there's one thing I've learned over the years, and I've been fortunate to coach some very senior executives in some very large organizations that have had to make major changes to the way they have gone about leading those organizations, is that an old dog can learn a new trick or new tricks, but you can only learn one trick at a time. The amount of neural pathway remolding that is needed in the brain is the reason why most Januaries are full of disappointment for people that set great big health goals and relationship goals and went and bought new clothes and new runners and joined a gym. That they were attempting to learn too many skills at the same time rather than working in a very layered way. So that's a long answer to the short question, which is I really encourage you to get face-to-face with the team. But there's no question that once the system's in place, you'll find that it won't matter where people are, as long as they've got, as long as the meetings are being held and they're experiencing those experiences, they'll be more engaged. There's another question just about tools. Yes, we haven't showed it to you today, but again, what we find really powerful is when that vision is created, ensuring that it is visible and seen by all of the team members as often as possible. If they're working remotely, perhaps it's the screensaver on their phone, on their home PC or laptop, getting it printed out, laminated, having it sit, on their work from home desk. When you walk into the office, walk into the business, where is it? What is our vision? What is it that we're aspiring towards? So I'm not using the word purpose or those things. We've got a very clear, simple definition of what vision is, which is very centric around the clients and the team members. And of course, if it's your business, you think about, well, what's getting you out of bed early in the night when you're waking up in the middle of the night worried about stuff? Okay, it's your own business. You've got a lot of freedom. You've got an enormous amount of responsibility. You've got employees. You've got people to feed, families to feed. The world's changing a lot. Cyber threats, AI, legislation, compliance, Donald Trump, blah, blah, blah. It's again, for you, it's your business. What is the vision for this business? It's encompassing the people and the customers that's going to get the hair standing up on the back of your neck, that's going to help you have that extra resilience. and if need be, get some help rather than attempting to do it all by yourself. Let me just check. I've got a Q&A question here. I'll just click the box. Are we getting a copy of the slides? Look, absolutely. If you send an email to info@smallbusinessaustralia.org, that'll be organised. Thanks for that question, Daryl. Many of you are Business Advantage members, so as you know, you'll be able to access the recording of today's webinar, as well as the other supporting resources. So, Liz, I'm not sure whether you've been sent a text from some of the members that you've been coaching, that sometimes they're a bit more comfortable sending text in terms of questions.
I think I was sent one in response to my comment about you also stepping up. And I will just say, sometimes when you get this feedback and you start looking at the gaps, sometimes it can be a little bit of a wake-up call for you as a leader as well. But it is so worth going through the process and continuing, because the benefits on the other side, that first meeting with the team, some things might have come up about not just the organization, but also maybe your management style. It is so worth persisting and listening and actioning. As I said, one of the things, it was actually a really simple thing about me opening, having my office door open and that sort of thing. And it is so worth you persisting, because by round 2 and then round 3, the difference in the team will be remarkable. It will really surprise you, I think, on how amazing the process works and how much it lifts the entire team. So that's probably, it just came through. Someone said, what did you mean by that? So I just thought I'd mention that it is worth really persisting, and also just acknowledge that if someone has put down in some anonymous feedback, when you're looking at those gaps and things, anything about your management style and that sort of thing, that's actually a really great indication too of how safe they feel already. So it becomes, that sense of safety and being able to speak up is incredibly important to making them feel valued and engaged. So applaud it and persist, and I think you will be really surprised at how easy everything then becomes.
Look, thanks a lot, Liz. And again, I'd like to thank everyone that's registered for today, and a big chunk of you that were able to attend live in person. And again, I'd like to thank PEXA have been a very good and are a very good partner of Small Business Australia, and with more than 1,000 law firms and conveyancing firms sponsored by PEXA into Business Advantage. I know our coaches at Small Business Australia have been enjoying immensely the work they've been doing, particularly with people running those firms. So, to all of you that are business owners, I want to thank you for everything you're doing in terms of being a business owner, employing those people, serving those customers, and all the other things you do in your local community. It's not something that you guys ever really blow your own trumpets about, but I'm forever talking to politicians and the media, when they're talking to Small Business Australia about the critical role that every small business owner and small business family plays as the heart and souls of local communities, because I still don't see big companies providing, work experience for high school students, let alone, sponsoring prizes for the trivia night at the kids' school, or, sponsoring the local rugby club. So thank you for everything you do in your business and in your community. And for the team leaders that are there, that perhaps you're not running your own business, but you are leading people. And, increasingly, there's probably not a more important role that you can play as a person in moving from a manager to a leader, and helping these people become, much more competent, much more confident, and make a much greater contribution, not only to your team, but in terms of, their future career and financial security. So again, there's some folks from PEXA that are here. Thank you, PEXA. Again, we value highly the relationship and the partnership. And for all of you, thank you for tuning in. I'd love to hear from you if you've got any feedback for us. And our very best wishes from both Liz and I to you guys getting more scores on the board. Thank you.